Hey guys, I don't know if you know, but Bob's has been running a promotion for Lord of the Rings figures since the 5th, and I went there yesterday. I only got them yesterday, which was the 8th, and I bought them. Which figures? All of them. They're here. I haven't opened any yet. I left them to open here in the video with you, so we'll open them one at a time. I'll show them to you, and we'll talk a bit about Lord of the Rings. There won't be any editing in this video. I didn't write anything, I didn't write a script, it's going to be freestyle, but we're going to talk a bit and show you all these little figures, so let's see them now. Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andre, and I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. Although I've never had any content on this channel about the Lord of the Rings, I've been a Lord of the Rings fan practically forever. I've read all the books, seen all the movies. Even the non-Lord of the Rings books, right? The Hobbit, the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, Fall of Gondolin, Children of Hurin. I've even read Tolkien's non-Lord of the Rings books about Middle-earth. So I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So when this Bob's promotion came up, I rushed there as fast as I could to buy these little figures, and I managed to buy the whole collection. So here's the bill. It all came to $33.30. Well, look, this is the price of the 7 figures. There are 7 in total, okay? So each one is 4 and something. Here's what I'm gonna do. The bag is here. I'm gonna open it at random. I'm gonna take one from inside. We'll open it, look at it, and we'll talk a bit about the movies, the books, and the characters. So let's see which figure comes here. You choose the figure. You don't buy at random. You can choose which figure you're going to buy. You don't have to buy the whole collection. You can buy one at a time. And the first was Legolas. Legolas, the interesting thing about him is that he's one of the characters in The Lord of the Rings who makes a connection with Tolkien's previous book, The Hobbit. Because Legolas's father, Thranduil, appears in The Hobbit, even though Legolas doesn't appear. And then when Tolkien wrote the next book, he didn't just write about Middle-earth, he wrote several other things, but the first one published was The Hobbit. And then after that, his publisher asked for new stories with hobbits, so he went on to write The Lord of the Rings. And then he brings this character here, who is Legolas, the son of Thranduil, who is an elven king, who appears in The Hobbit. The dwarves go to where Thranduil's territory is, and he makes this connection, putting Thranduil's son in the next book, which is The Lord of the Rings. So I'm going to show you the little figure here. Let it focus a bit, if you can. Damn, it's not focusing. Oh, it's focused. And the figure is small, but it's very well made. I really like the quality of it. So, it seems to be very well made, very resistant material. So, let's open the next one. Okay, I'll take it here. Let's cut it out and see what the next figure is. And it's Frodo Baggins, the main character. He's here with the sword. Is he a bit crooked? I think he came a bit crooked. Yeah, he's got... Or he's like that, I don't know. It looks like his little foot here is a bit dented. Maybe you can undo it later. It must have been dented inside the box, something like that. But he's holding the sword, which is the Sting, an elven sword. Right, which... It's Bilbo's sword, also making another connection with the Hobbit, because this sword here is Bilbo's sword that he finds in the Hobbit, and then Frodo, in The Lord of the Rings, inherits this sword from Bilbo himself. So he also has... You'll see that there are several of these relationships between the two books. The Lord of the Rings with the Hobbit. And Frodo, obviously, he's a Hobbit. One doubt that many people have is that, what is the Hobbit? Because normally, in other mythologies, we already know the other races, the elves, they're part of other mythologies. Now the Hobbit seems to be Tolkien's alone. In Tolkien's story, in the legend of Middle-earth, there are only 3 races that are intelligent, and all the others are variations of these 3 races. 3 races, I mean, apart from the Maiar and the Valar, who are like entities. But the races are men, elves, and dwarves. The Hobbits, then, are part of the race of men. They're kind of a variation of the race of men. So basically, hobbits and men, they're the same species, although they're much smaller. They're actually the same species, because they're a variation of the species of men. So, the little figure is here. I don't know what I'm going to do with this little foot. It looks a bit crooked. I'll see if it stands up. It will stand up. I'll look at it in a bit. And then the next figure. This is Sauron, the villain from the Lord of the Rings saga. So look, he's here in his armor. And I've just been talking about the Maiar and the Valar, who are intelligent races too, only these are different because they're like entities, as if they were almost gods. They're not gods because the only god in Tolkien's legend is Eru, Ilúvatar. And they would be like archangels, but if you take them, what they are like and what function they have, they are very similar to the Greek pantheon, the Greek gods. Poseidon, Ulmo is very similar to Poseidon. They have a special place, a physical place where they live, which is Valinor, which is very similar to Mount Olympus. So it's very similar to these pantheons, whether Egyptian, Greek, or Nordic. But these Maiar and Valar, they're the same species. There's only one species, which is the Ainur, but they're divided into two different classes. Among the Ainur, there are the Valar, who are the most powerful. They are few. And there are the Maiar, who are a lower caste of these entities. They would be the auxiliaries of the Valar, and Sauron is a Maiar. He is from the lowest caste of these entities, and he has been present in existence since before the creation of Middle-earth. He was there in the Song of the Ainur, when the Ainur sang a song, and they created all of Middle-earth. Not only was he there, but all the Maiar and Valar. So Sauron has been there since creation. But he's not the only Maiar in Tolkien's story. There are other characters in The Lord of the Rings who are also Maiar. And we'll talk about that in a moment, because we're going to open up the next little figure. Which is this one, Gimli. Gimli, a dwarf. An interesting thing about The Lord of the Rings is that you've probably heard someone say dwarves, not dwarfs, in both English and Portuguese. In Portuguese, they call them anaus, which also wouldn't be dwarves correctly in Portuguese. That's because Tolkien uses... That word exists. It's a word that used to refer to dwarves, but it's very old and dwarves in Portuguese is the same thing. Dwarves is correct, but it's a very old word that has fallen into disuse. But he uses this word precisely to give the idea of an ancient word, since the dwarves are the oldest of the three races in Middle-earth. Among men, elves and dwarves are the oldest because they shouldn't exist. The dwarves were created by Aule. Aule is one of the Valar, whom I just mentioned. Who are those entities? Men and elves were created by Eru himself, Ilúvatar, who is the god who created everything. He created the Maiar and the Valar, who had the mission of creating Middle-earth, taking care of it, doing all the other things, but these two races, the elves and men, were the children of Eru. But Aule, in his haste to fight Morgoth, who was getting in the way and destroying their whole project, creates the dwarves, and he creates them to be stocky, strong, heat-resistant, in order to survive in ancient Middle-earth, which was still very raw, very inhospitable, and difficult to survive. Only Eru doesn't like it very much. He gets there, fights with Aule apologizes. But after all that, Eru ends up giving the imperishable flame to the dwarves, so that they gain consciousness, and they sort of become Eru's adopted children. But they go to sleep and only wake up after the other races also appear. So Gimli, he's another character who also has a connection with the Hobbit, because Gimli, he's Glóin's son, who is one of the dwarves who are there helping Bilbo in the Hobbit. So it's another connection. A connection he also makes with the Hobbit book is that Gimli leads the Fellowship of the Ring into Moria, and they find Balin's tomb inside. Balin is also one of the dwarves who helps Bilbo in the Hobbit. So let's open the next figure. This one, that's Aragorn. Aragorn, who became King of Gondor. Ah, I didn't show Gimli close up, did I? So here, Gimli. Oh, his helmet. It's very nice. He looks exactly like the helmet in the movie. That's what's strange. There are some figures that are very similar to the ones in the movie, but there are others that aren't so much. But Gimli, his helmet looks just like it does in the movie. And then there's Aragorn, who is of the race of men, but Aragorn is no ordinary man. His ancestry is from the island of Númenor, which are different men, they live longer. Aragorn is in his 80s, with this face here. When Lord of the Rings comes on, he's almost 100. Theoden, who is the king who appears. Aragorn saw him as a little boy. He's much older than him. That's because, in an ancient war in Middle-earth, a group of men helped in the Valar's war against Morgoth, Melkor, who is a rebellious Valar who becomes the great villain of Tolkien's legend. This guy, to give you an idea, Sauron, this one, who is the Maiar, is his henchman. So this guy got involved in a mega war, and then he brought everyone together, the Valar and a group of men. They also helped in this war. And as a reward, they received a gift from the Valar, which was to receive a longer lifespan and the island of Númenor. But that island ended up sinking a long time later because the people of Númenor rebelled against the Valar themselves, invaded Valinor, and the island was sunk by Eru himself. The Valar didn't fight them. They asked Eru for help, as if it were a kind of prayer. They no longer had direct access to Eru, but Eru decided to close off access from Middle-earth to Valinor once and for all, and destroyed the path between these two continents, and the island of Númenor, which was in the middle, sank. One interesting thing is that it was this guy, Sauron, who did it all. He went to the Númenorians and tried to convince them, and then this guy did it all. But he ended up sinking along with the island of Númenor and lost his body, his physical form. And then he had to rebuild himself. Only he lost power as a result, and he couldn't take on his beautiful form. He had a form that he wore and presented himself as Anatar, the Lord of the Gifts, who was mega handsome, the well-groomed guy. And after that, he only used this form here, which is the best-known form in the films. The form that appears at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings. And then, Aragorn, he becomes King of Gondor at the end of the 3 films, but people don't quite understand why he didn't do it before. Why didn't he just go and say, guys, I'm a descendant of Isildur, so I'm going to sit here on the throne and now I'm king, right? But that's not actually the case. He couldn't do that, because Isildur wasn't the king of Gondor. He was going to claim the kingdom of Gondor, because the men who left Númenor didn't go there with the others to invade the lands of Valinor. They went to Middle-earth and founded some kingdoms. And Gondor wasn't Isildur's. The kingdom of Gondor was without a king. And then Isildur, after the war, after they defeated Sauron, he would go there to reclaim the kingdom. And he would get it because he was the hero who fought in the war. They defeated Sauron. Only he died halfway through, and he never got there. So Aragorn, as Isildur's heir, he's the heir of the guy who was going to claim the throne, but didn't make it. So Aragorn, if he got there, the people would just say to him, there's nothing here for you, you're not king, you're nothing. That's why Aragorn didn't claim the throne first, nor did his father, nor did his grandfather, nor did any of Aragorn's other antecedents, because Gondor simply wouldn't accept a king. Now why did Aragorn finally become king? Because he's not just Isildur's heir. He reinforced Elendil's own weapon, which defeated Sauron. That sword that was broken, and Elrond reinforced. He complained to the ghosts that had betrayed Isildur so that he could come and help in the war. He led the army against Sauron, and he's from the lineage of the kings of those people. So he's from the lineage of Isildur. So he's not just a guy who's descended. He did all these deeds to be able to claim the throne. And now, I've said enough. We're going to open the next figure, which is going to be Gandalf. One of my favorite characters. So look, Gandalf the Grey, and then that story I was telling about the Valar and the Maiar. I left it for when I opened this character here, because he's also a Maiar. Not only him, but all mages are Maiar. Who are the mages? There are 5, Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, and the 2 blue ones, who don't appear at any time. But those 3 do appear. Radagast doesn't appear in The Lord of the Rings. He actually appears in the book. They didn't put him in the movie because his part is too small, so they ended up removing him. But in the Hobbit book, he appears more. So all these wizards are Maiar, but they're not Maiar like Sauron. Why is that? When these wizards came to Middle-earth, they came precisely to fight Sauron, who was terrorizing Middle-earth. But the Valar who sent them didn't want another mega-powerful creature hanging around Middle-earth, for fear that they might rebel, which actually happened with Saruman. So, they came with their powers curtailed. This is written in the unfinished tales, so they don't have all the divine power of the Maiar that Sauron has. And, in fact, Sauron himself is already a much reduced version of what he was in the past. First of all, he had that loss at the fall of the island of Númenor, Then he was defeated in the last alliance. And when we're in the books and the movies, and in the movies he appears as that eye. In the book he actually has a physical form, but in the movie he's portrayed as that eye, the eye of Sauron. He also has the eye in the book, but it's not just the eye. So he's already without the ring, which holds most of his power. So that's already a much reduced version of his power. And yet he seems to be much more powerful than Gandalf. But Gandalf and Sauron, they are of the same species. Not only of the same species, which are the Ainur, but also of the same caste, which are the Maiar. And it's not just these characters who are of the same species and caste. The Balrog that Gandalf fights when they enter Moria is also a Maiar. There aren't many Balrogs, they're all Maiar. I think there are 7 in all, if I'm not mistaken. But there is their leader, who is Gothmog. Gothmog was the one who fought the elf, what's his name again? Feanor, the fire spirit, the most powerful elf of all, who created the Silmarillion. So these Balrogs are also Maiar. Now, why is it so different? Oh, another thing. The sun and the moon, in Tolkien's legendary universe. The sun is a woman, and the moon is a man. They are also Maiar. They are Maiar who were assigned to become sun and moon by the Valar. What a crap job, right? But they were appointed when the trees were destroyed by Ungoliant, who is a giant spider that eats light. She destroyed the trees. The trees were like the previous sun and moon, and then these two Maiar were given the job of becoming the luminaries. A Maiar woman, became the sun, and a man who was in love with this woman. He offered to become the moon so that he could accompany her, so he became the moon. And then, the Maiar are very different, Gandalf and the other wizards, because they had their powers wiped away so that they could enter Middle-earth. The Balrogs are for another reason. The sun and moon are also because they were transformed by the power of the Valar, so that they could take on this role. The one who still takes on the form most similar to what he was originally is Sauron. What happened to him was simply the loss of power through the battles he fought and lost during his history. But he never underwent any kind of transformation similar to that of Gandalf and the other Maiar. So I've said enough again, have I? Let's open the next one. And it's the last one, shall we? There are 7 in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't even need to see which one it is, because I already know which one was missing. It's Gollum. So let's open up here. Look, he's got a fish in his hand. It's Gollum Sméagol. And what is Gollum? Gollum, he is... Damn, it's not coming into focus. Damn. Come on. Gollum is a hobbit, so he's the same species as Frodo, Bilbo, Sam, Merry, Pippin. He's a hobbit, and he has this bizarre form that we see. He's like a monster. But that's because he's been corrupted by the One Ring. And we saw that Frodo was already beginning to be corrupted by the One Ring in the Lord of the Rings movie itself. Gollum, he wore the ring for centuries. And the ring didn't let him die. Okay? Hobbits don't live that long, but he lived that long because of... It's not coming into focus. I'll try again in a bit. Because of the ring he was wearing. And then he became insane and completely deformed because of the corruption of that One Ring. But he's a hobbit. And remember, I said that hobbits are a variation of the race of men. So basically, Gollum is a man, a normal human being. And I had talked about that, about the 3 races, what happened and why there are so many races, but actually there are only 3 races. There are only 3 races of intelligent beings in Middle-earth, apart from the Maiar and the Valar, who are entities. And the races are elves, men, and dwarves. What about the orcs? What are the orcs? The orcs are kind of dumb, but they talk, they use tools, they use weapons, they're intelligent. But the orcs are a variation on the elves, not like the hobbit. The hobbit is a natural variation of man. They are more like Sméagol, a corrupted variation. But not like Sméagol because of a ring. It's because of Melkor, Morgoth, one of the Valar, who rebelled. And he's the great villain of Tolkien's legend, as I said before. This guy, when the elves started appearing, he kidnapped a bunch of elves and experimented on them, turning them into these monsters that are the orcs. So basically, orcs and elves are the same race, and any other intelligent race in Middle-earth is also a variation of the races that already exist. Either he is a Maiar who has been transformed like the Balrogs, or he is the corruption of another race, like the orcs, who are corrupted elves. What about dragons? Dragons are intelligent in Tolkien's universe. Smaug is a talking dragon. Glaurung is also an intelligent dragon. Dragons are similar to orcs. They were created by Morgoth, just as most of the other monstrous creatures were also created by Morgoth. So there was an original creature that was transformed by Morgoth, and he used his own power to do it. When I say using his power, he used part of his power to make these creatures. He didn't have the power of creation like Eru. He had to get rid of a real part of himself, and he became weaker and weaker as he did this. And then he created the dragons and all the other beings in Middle-earth, which are monstrous in this way. Almost all of them, in fact. So much so that when there is the great battle against Melkor, the Valar and everyone else join in to fight. In the book, it said that Melkor has a fraction of the power he had before, because he did this process of draining himself of his power to transform these creatures. So there are all the little figures here. There are 7 little figures. I wish there were more, because there are some characters I really like who aren't here. For example, Galadriel could have a figure. If there was one of the Balrog, I'd really like that too, as he has a really cool design. But there are only these 7, and I now have the complete collection. One thing that happened, it's just that the Fellowship of the Ring, it doesn't have the complete Fellowship of the Ring, but it could have, right? At least the main characters. There are only a few here, but there's only Frodo as a hobbit. There's no Sam, Merry, or Pippin. And there's no Boromir either. He's a nice character too, and I like him a lot. But one thing I just remembered, coincidentally I was looking through my things here, and I found some old drawings I have. I liked to draw when I was a kid, and I have several drawings here, and I remembered that the last drawing I did in my life was of the Lord of the Rings. I'll show it to you. I was even looking here to see if Gimli was similar, and Gimli was one of the last drawings I did in my life. I don't draw that well, okay? I know that if you look online, there are lots of drawings by people who draw absurdly well. But, hey, here's a drawing I've already done, of Gimli. But it's not just Gimli, no, there's... Oh, I've got Legolas here too. Where's Legolas? Legolas is here. Turn Legolas over. Oh, here he is. And I'm not going to show them all, because there are a lot of drawings here. I'm not going to show them all, because they're not all about Middle-earth. I'm just going to show this one, which is the last drawing I did in my life. It's been... There's the date here. 2013. Holy shit. It's been 10 years. And then there's nothing else. All the others are drawings of other things, so I won't show you too much. It's not Lord of the Rings. I've got Hunter x Hunter here, but what else? Legolas. There's even a drawing of my wife. I did one for her. That's it. But that's it, guys. Yeah, the figures are here. I'm gonna put them somewhere on my shelf. And then, when the next videos come out, you'll be able to see them here on the set somewhere. I've yet to decide. Guys, I've brought some books here to show you, so that if anyone wants to start reading Tolkien's books, The Legend of Middle-earth, they'll have a guide, so they know where to start, which book to read first. So here we have the most obvious, which is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. These 3 books here are very heavy reading for beginners. If you're a small child, for example, or someone who's just starting to read Tolkien's books, you might find these books a bit strange, because they're really much heavier reading. I would recommend starting with the previous story. Even in order of publication, it's the previous one, which is The Hobbit. This book here, it's much easier to read, much more enjoyable. It has a much simpler language, it's much shorter, and it's a very nice story. And you already have an introduction to the characters that will appear later in The Lord of the Rings, like Gandalf, for example. He's already here in this book. Now, if you've read this one, then gone on to this one, and you want more, then you can go on to the Nerd's Old Testament. These are the 2 books here. Here you have the Unfinished Tales and the Silmarillion. Here you have the most epic stories from Tolkien's legendary. All the stories of antiquity, of the Valar, the Maiar, the great heroes of the First Ages, the First Age, the Second Age, the Third Age. So it's all here. Very epic stories, but it's also very heavy reading, heavier than The Lord of the Rings. But it's very cool. In fact, my favorite of all Tolkien's books is the Silmarillion. The Unfinished Tales works more like a complement to the Silmarillion. If you're going to read either of these, I recommend that you read the Silmarillion first, and then, If you've already read the Silmarillion and you still want more, some of the stories that are here in the Silmarillion, they have their own book. Like, for example, The Children of Hurin and the Fall of Gondolin. The Fall of Gondolin is described in the Silmarillion. The history of the Children of Hurin is also described in the Silmarillion. But here you get the full story and not just the summary. So these two books are also very good books. I don't recommend that you read them straight away, because otherwise you won't have the context of everything that surrounds these stories. If you've read the Silmarillion first, you'll already have that. So, then you can read these books here afterwards. They're also very good books. But it's not just those, there's more. I have a few more books back there, but there are too many to show. But if you start by reading these books here, that's great. So that's it for the books. I'll put them down here in the description. If you want to take a look, the link is down here. So guys, that's it for today. We're finishing up here. I know the video was long, but I can't keep it short when it comes to Lord of the Rings. This was the first video on this subject, but depending on the reception, I may do more. So if you liked the information in this video, comment down here, and remember to subscribe to this channel to keep following. And so, thank you very much for everyone who's watched this far. I hope I've helped you in some way, added some information. It's my daughter here. Come here, Luana. Hi, Lulu. Bye. So that's it for today. See you later. Ellen sila lumen o mentielvo.